Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I'm John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. A good topic for you today. Let's do it. What's something you've seen that you cannot explain? Please remember to like, share, hype, listen, and ask for shoutouts. And subscribe. I walked out of my barn one night into the darkness, and along the tree line I saw a white bipedal creature about 2 feet high running by. It was so real. I ran into the house as soon as possible and began Googling escaped zoo animals and missing gibbons. I never found out what it was. Mine isn't entirely unexplainable, but it was certainly unexpected and shocking. I was on my way home and stopped for a red light. I looked to my right and saw my dead child sitting in the passenger seat beside me. I blinked hard, and the image was gone when I opened my eyes. He had been dead about 6 months at that time. I assumed the incident was something related to stress, grief, and trauma. I was running late and walking home through the rain at the beginning of a severe storm affecting my area. As I was passing a park that was about 5 minutes away from my apartment, I saw a person dressed in white and holding an umbrella walking in my direction from down the street. After about 30 seconds, they disappeared as they walked under a flickering streetlight. Then about an hour later, with the storm in full swing, I looked out my window in the direction of the park, and I saw the same figure sitting on a structure in the park, and they were gone by the time I turned away to call my wife to see if she could see them too. When I was in the U.S. Air Force in the 90s, I saw an aircraft that did not exist, that I was ordered to say did not exist, because I couldn't possibly exist because it clearly did not exist. This is pretty close to the official directive I was given. I am in no way saying this was an alien craft. It was just a very advanced aircraft that clearly did not exist. Yorktown, Virginia battlefields around 2 a.m. My then girlfriend and best friend went driving around the battlefields because we were bored teenagers. At one point, I needed to turn around. There wasn't anywhere to do it easily, so I found a small spot at the tree line to turn around at. When I pulled into this little area, really like a single parallel parking spot on the side, so my ass was still in the road, up ahead of us at the tree line, we all saw a gray figure or shape that appeared to be hanging as if from a noose, and then just as quickly as we saw it, it was gone. I don't want to say it was a ghost, but me sideways, if it sure as shit didn't just disappear and be all gray and translucent, at least in the dark, and just my headlights. My brother was running late for school, and my mom was yelling at him to find his shoes so they could leave. They were tearing the house apart and couldn't find them. Back then, there were commercials to listen to, Rice Krispies snack, crackle and pop, and it could tell you things. I put my ear to the bowl and heard top shelf of the closet. I tell my mom to check. There she found them. I think I'm a serial psychic. In my childhood home, if you looked out the back door, there was a little inlet of land, like the 2 other streets circled around it, and it was like an owl of land. There used to be 2 old houses, but they were torn down around the late 90s, and left as an open field. One evening, I took the trash out, and was about to close the back door when I looked into the field for some reason, and I swear I saw what looked like the hind legs of a dog. At first I thought it was a stray, and kept waiting to see the front half of it. I never did, and as I kept on looking, I realized I could see through the back half I was looking at. Now the legs were moving like a dog when trotting about. I was spooked and slammed the door so hard half the house shook, and my mom asked what was wrong with me. I'll never forget that. I have no idea what it was, and I've never seen it again. I've since moved, but damn. When I was about 12, my cousin was really into astronomy. One night my mom went over to babysit him and his brother, and I went along to play with him. After dark, he got out of his brand new telescope so we could try and look at planets. After a while, he went inside to use the bathroom and get us some sodas. While he was gone, almost immediately after he went through the door, it flew overhead. The thing was massive and flew pretty low, like maybe a couple 100 feet over the tallest trees near me. It was an industrial gray and shaped like a rectangular version of the Millennium Falcon, complete with a glowing blue-white light across the tail that seemed to be its propulsion. It was absolutely quiet as it passed over, but it was gone by the time my cousin came back outside. Late 90s, I'm thinking 98, I was in my backyard at night, southern Illinois, looking west. In the sky was a big explosion, not like a bomb, but like something going hyper fast through the atmosphere. I have seen hundreds of shooting stars. It was not a shooting star. It was huge. Looked like it was right above me. It was bright red, orange, bright white, no sound. I saw a group of lights moving in the sky in a way that isn't possible for any aircraft. This was about 30 years ago. My family was at a campground. I was out with my sister one evening, just walking around. Something in the sky caught our attention. There was a group of 4 or 5 lights about the same brightness as a bright star that were alternately blipping from one spot to another, super fast, and then staying stationary in that new spot. All of them were doing it. Stay, blip, stay, blip. This went on for quite a while. To this day, I still have absolutely no rational explanation. I asked my sister a few years ago if I was just imagining it, and she said no. She remembered seeing them as well. In 2003, I was about 8. My 15-year-old brother lived in the basement and was usually home from skipping high school by the time I got home. One afternoon at around 2 p.m. I got home and run downstairs to find him like I did every afternoon. This time it wasn't him standing there. It was some floating dark hand that looked burnt behind the door reaching for me. Crazy thing is, I screamed, ran upstairs and cried. My mom called my brother and he said he was at the mall. To this day we still hear footsteps in rooms we're not in, and the TVs have turned on by themselves multiple times with nobody in the room. Not really sure what's going on, but we've been here 31 years. I'm convinced the house is gently haunted. Not enough to get you to leave, but enough to spook you. It's also the only house I sleep in where I often get sleep paralysis, but it's hard to get anybody to believe my experiences here. Only my friends and family who slept over have said that, heard and feel things. But we all can't explain it, lol. It's enough to make you feel crazy. Was a meteorologist for NOAA, ran by flight services in an airport control tower on a mid-shift overnight and saw 3 objects on a radar sweep in formation flying up the eastern U.S. coast, going 2,100 miles per hour at an altitude of 60,000 feet. Aviation at the time flew 500 miles per hour or less at 32,000 feet or less. No one flew much above 1,100 miles per hour or above 40,000 feet. Alright guys, it's been a few days, a couple of shout outs today. Want to say hello to Ryder from Rhode Island. I hope you and the Paw Patrol are doing well. Surf Squatch, I'm sure your page doesn't suck as bad as you say it does. And to Ward Hensley, hello my friend, thanks for listening for over 5 years. That's when we started, so hope everything's great, and I'll talk to you guys soon. I was driving down a mountain road at night, many miles from town. As I passed a curve, my headlights illuminated a man with long hair standing nearby. He had his back to me, so I drove off. After about half an hour later, I realized I didn't have enough gas, so I had to turn around. When I passed him the second time, he was turned the other way. That's how I knew it was a person and not a mannequin. Still can't figure out why he was there. Scared me to death. I was driving home late one night and about to enter a stretch in the woods. My headlights picked up what I thought was a dog eating something on the side of the road. As I got closer, I saw it had no fur. My headlights picked it up, and it was a massive, nearly Great Dane sized. It waited until I was very close to turn and run across the road into the trees. What made me go from hairless dog to what the was when it began moving. Its back legs were not dog-like at all. Rather, they seemed bent at a very high spot and almost looked like when a person tries to run on all fours. Was on the way to our daughter's swim lessons. Husband was driving, so I was just staring out the window and enjoying the view. Then I saw a goose flying backwards, clear as day. The rest of the flock followed soon after, but they were flying in the usual manner. It was like the first goose had encountered a weird lag. I was so flabbergasted that I didn't think to immediately bring it up to my husband, who was merrily scatting away to some Led Zeppelin on the radio, whilst my whole concept of goose flight was being shattered. It was only after the goose had left my field of view that I managed to say something like, "You did notice that goose was flying backwards?" And my husband replied, "No." This was 2 years ago, and I still think back on it. Was it a glitch in the Matrix? Did I hallucinate this singularly reversed goose flight? Was it just a dumb yet talented goose? Maybe it had a brain injury. So many questions, never an answer. When I was in my 20s, I went hiking in the woods close to my parents' place. The trail I took was a very well-known one, clearly marked, and typically saw moderate traffic from other hikers. But on the day I went, it was a bit cold, damp, and there was almost no one on it. I enjoyed such days because I would be able to hear all the natural sounds without interruption. I came around a bend, and where the trail was overlooking a steeply sloped meadow of sorts, dense redwoods all around, it was a place that I would stop to just sit and take in everything. Out of the corner of my eye, down in the sloped meadow area, I caught a glimpse of movement, something behind one of the redwoods. Now, it's important to know that the area does have wildlife, so I figured it would be a raccoon or deer or mountain lion. As I am scanning the area, I caught a glimpse of it again, a fluid undulation of darkness peeking behind a tree. My spine got chills because the movement was somehow unnatural. It wasn't an animal, it was too tall, almost kind of formless. I picked myself up and all but ran away, trying not to make too obvious, lest whatever it was could sense fear. I got home and promptly fell sick for a day or so. I do not know what it was. All I know is that it felt wrong and shook me to my core. Bearing in mind that I'm a huge skeptic and don't really believe in UFOs or UAPs, one night, while driving home, I saw 3 red lights in the sky floating back and forth. This was before drones were a big thing. We lived by a naval air station, so I knew what aircraft were like, and it wasn't like any aircraft I ever saw. I also know for a fact that it wasn't any planets because I'm familiar with them, as well as they would physically move back and forth regardless of the speed or direction I was traveling. Back in the early 90s, there was a show in California called Bay Area Backroads that highlighted a mining town called Nevada City. I was up in the East Bay for college and had the rare weekend with nothing to do, so a friend and I drove out to investigate what was a very quaint town for the weekend. Being history buffs, we decided to check out the Pioneer Cemetery up the hill. We were looking at the graves from the 1800s when suddenly the cutest but grumpiest dog ran up the hill from a neighboring house barking like crazy. My friend thought it was going to bite us, but it ran right past us and kept running up the hill to a wooden cross over a grave. It kept barking and snarling at something waist high in front of the cross, and then backed up, snarled again, and then started circling a tree like it was being chased, and finally booked it out of the graveyard and back to the safety of its own house. We never did see what the dog was chasing, and what ended up chasing the dog. Years later, I realized that the unexplainable can happen just like that, in the middle of a sunny, cheerful day. We'll never know what the dog saw that we could not. Tame compared to the other comments here, but one night I was biking to get some food and looked over to a dark driveway. I saw a silhouette of what looked like a 3 to 4 foot tall dog there against a garage that looked still but set off alarm bells. I of course immediately got out of there. On my way back I checked again and there was nothing. I know there are dogs in the neighborhood and some are massive, but the ones I know of aren't in that area and are always leashed. That house does put up a lot of decorations, but as I said, I didn't see it on the way back nor any other days. The only logical guesses I would have would be I just missed a dog or misjudged size or saw multiple things vaguely resembling it that I somehow didn't see again. I think I saw it mostly out of the corner of my eye, but I do remember turning toward it and still seeing it. Personally, I don't believe in ghosts and that stuff, but my guesses feel like a stretch. Sitting in the middle of a room in a very old farmhouse, I'm guessing it was built in the very early 1900s, I was talking on a landline telephone. That room was always much colder than any room in the house. The only light in that room was on the ceiling and activated by a pull chain. The pull chain pulled on its own and the light shut off. I immediately stopped mid-sentence on my phone conversation and said goodbye to the person on the phone, hung up, and left that room in mere seconds. Lived in an apartment on a hill. I'm on the balcony having a cigarette. Due to the slope and low building, I have a clear view of the alley a couple blocks uphill. I see someone climbing up a windowsill. Police car turns into the alley with lights on. They cuff the guy and detain him for 10 or 15 minutes. I'm not paying too much attention, but I look over and see the guy do a standing backflip. Cops hop in their car and take off, sirens blazing, leaving the guy behind. I like to think he flipped out of his cuffs and scared them off, but he probably just lived there. Christmas Eve 2 decades ago, rural South Australia. I was leaving a friend's house, and as she walked me to my car, we joked about never being too old to search the skies on Christmas Eve. Haha. We both looked up and both saw the same thing, a very slow-moving object in the sky. Moving steadily northward, not as high as helicopters fly, but not low enough for us to make out too many details. Silent, no lights, looked about the size of a small to medium car, definitely not a bird or animal. We both watched it in astonishment for a few seconds, then ran back inside to where my friend's hubby was, and told him to come outside too, because he was Father Christmas on his sleigh. He was an extremely no-nonsense, very skeptical and sarcastic man, and had no time for the fancies of the two of us, but we were persistent enough that he came outside too. He was utterly silent alongside us as we pointed to the dark shape that was still just visible in the darkening sky as it continued north. We asked for an explanation, an idea of what we were looking at, but he had nothing, just told us we were too old to believe in bullshit, and he walked back inside. None of us had been drinking or partaking on any drugs. I was late 20s or early 30s, and my friend and her husband were both early 60s. The drone technology at the time wasn't sufficient. It was too dark to see what it was, but it was too low for any kind of commercial aircraft, and the lack of lights and sound were not consistent with a plane or helicopter. We know it wasn't a sleigh, but either way, every Christmas Eve since then, I spend a long time outside studying the skies just in case. And no, I'm not using this as a creative writing exercise. It happened. There were 3 of us, and we've never been able to guess at what we actually did see in the twilight sky that Christmas Eve. Was playing with my grandma and a sister when I was little in our family room. Nearest doorway was the hallway leading to the foyer, and the left of the hallway was our living room. Out of the corner of my eye, I could have sworn I saw a black figure or two, like a shadow almost, appear and go into the living room. I can't remember if I ran and checked immediately, or a few minutes later, but there was no one in there, and I always weirdly remember that moment as when my dark imagination began. Like when you close your eyes and it's all black, except for the myriad abstract neon colors and shapes. Last year I was in the school bathroom when I heard a faint but loud woman's voice calling my name like an echo. It was during the class break when bathrooms and hallways are usually very busy and noisy, so I didn't think much of it. Until later when I was on my way home from school and heard that same voice calling my name. this time in a panicky, alarming way. It sounded like it was coming from the sky. I know I was the only one that heard it because when it happened, I was walking past this playground packed with children and their parents who just kept doing what they were doing. Granted, I was under a lot of stress and sleep deprivation back then because of personal problems, so maybe I was just hearing things, but still it's very unsettling to think some supernatural mumbo-jumbo was at play. As a teenager, my older brother and I spent a lot of time in the garage after Dad left. We were in there smoking pot every single day and night for hours a day, and usually with friends over. One night, just like 1,000 others, my brother and I, smoking a joint in the garage, when we heard a weird noise right outside of the closed garage door. It was weird. We talked about it for a few minutes and got close to it and listened intently. It sounded like a very large piece of concrete being slowly dragged across the driveway, inches from us, and we just couldn't make any sense out of it. After a few minutes, we decided that, though we didn't know it was happening, someone was certainly in our driveway. We grabbed some makeshift weapons and opened the door. I crouched to see in case someone ran off. We bolted outside and there was absolutely nothing to be seen or heard. Never heard that sound again. As a kid, various relatives used to take me on trips, zoo, museums, amusement park, the movies, etc. One of these trips, my grandfather took us kids to the movies. Now, these old movie houses date back to the days when they had live stage entertainment, vaudeville. This old theater my grandfather took us to had an orchestra pit, even though it's never been used in decades, seeing as how vaudeville has been dead all that time. I was following my grandfather in the area between the front row seats and the orchestra pit, when just out of curiosity I peeked into the orchestra pit. There was no floor. One could see into the basement. But on the basement floor was, well, you ever heard that old Humpty Dumpty poem? Humpty Dumpty sat on a wall, Humpty Dumpty had a great fall, etc. On the floor of the basement was a large man-sized egg with a happy face painted on its shell. It had arms and legs. It was on its back, flailing its arms and legs as if it were trying to stand up, but couldn't, due to its egg shape. I looked away at my grandfather for a second, then looked back into the orchestra pit. This time the painted expression on his face changed. Now, painted expression was one of grief and frustration. The eyes were closed and the mouth was in a grimace. I looked away for a brief second or so and looked back into the orchestra pit. This time there was no egg, just the bare floor of the basement. I looked away again just for a few seconds, I guess looking to tell someone what I saw, but then looked back into the orchestra pit. This time the orchestra pit floor was there. I couldn't see the basement anymore. The orchestra pit floor had only a small handful of wooden folding chairs on it, nothing else. As the years passed and it was going to the movies on my own, sometimes I went to that very same theater again. Each and every time I did, before the movie started, I'd go take a look into the orchestra pit, but I never saw anything like that again. Just the plain old bare floor of the orchestra pit, without the wooden folding chairs. That old theater is now gone, a typical victim of the expansion of home video and cable TV. I think I can explain the incident, but it was so random that I've never forgotten it. A few years ago on a random summer weekday, I was at an aquarium with my husband. One of the first attractions when you walk into the main part was the aquarium is the beluga whale exhibit, which has several viewing windows. The place is packed with kids and we're all admiring these poor trapped whales when some movement in the back of the exhibit catches my attention. On the other side of the tank is a wooden deck, and there was a bunch of people moving around quickly. I thought maybe they were getting ready to do a feeding, but then I realized that there's something big just laying on the ground unmoving, and slowly it registers on me that what I'm looking at are the feet of a man in a full scuba outfit lying motionless on the deck. Now there are some people trying to do CPR and Some other people stand in front of the body to block the view. Everyone on the deck is crying. The crowd on the deck parts again, and a group of people picks up and drags the man in scuba suit inside, and the door closes. Everyone on the deck is gone. Exhibit remains open. Kids and adults around us blissfully unaware we just probably watched a man die. Later I tried to look up information on the incident, but never could find a single article or incident report. Equally odd, nothing was said at the park about the incident while we were there. Not sure anyone other than my husband and I saw what happened.